Good evening, everyone. I trust you can all hear me fine. As usual, just a one in the chat to let me know that my audio is coming through correctly. Because as you know, that's something I mess up on a regular basis. So yeah, thank you all for being here. Let me see who's in attendance today. So we've got, well, let's see, Dino Dennis, Dodder, welcome, John Doe, XYZ, thanks, good to see you. Simon said, Tom Gyokai, Eva, welcome. And of course, did I see Horst there? Yes, he is. I'm late, but not too late. No, Ben Yosef, Kush, Fortunato Martin, Mick M, Time Phaser, welcome, guys. Thank you all for being here. I suspect I have decent audio, so let me minimize that. Emmanuel Shahid, wow, it's been a while. Welcome, great to see you. Okay, guys, so today we need to speak about Darwin, right? And I am going to just get that ready. Of course, to start, we should kick off with something. Joel Thomas, welcome. Audio is great. Great to hear. Thanks, Horst. Okay, let's start with this. I thought this might be interesting. This was sent to me by you-know-who. Europe in the modern era and today. Parisian brothels were known to provide turkeys for their clients. As the men were about to experience orgasm through having blah 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 with turkeys, they would break the bird's neck, causing the birds something something to constrict and spasm, clamping down on their blah 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 and creating pleasure. So in the 19th century France, bestiality became an organized practice, and at the time of Napoleon III, bestiality was said to have been one of the allied activities of the Society for Advancement of SODOM space Y, which met regularly in the and notable public displays of bestiality was one of the main factors which led to the French Revolution. Okay, so yeah. But Christians are bad, right? Yeah, this stuff is all good apparently, and let's have a look at where we might get this incredible historical information. Let's go here. You can download this. You can look for this one. If you don't have it, it'll be on my. I'll put it in my Google archive in a while, or maybe I'll just also drop these in the chat in the description later for download. Understanding B and Z by Hani Maletsky. So I'll download that. And then also here's another one, B and Z, sexual relations with aminals. So yeah, publication of the International Society for Anthrozoology by Andrea M. Beats and Anthony. Yeah, guys, halal in Islam, but also I guess yeah, this is secular society. Secular society. Yeah, this is what we get when we yeah, secular society. What can I say? So I've had a few discussions with atheists on my channel recently, and they don't really listen to the facts that I present. Obviously, they have a propaganda script that they simply stick with, things they just simply say. One atheist said that it's an utter mistake to define atheism as a rejection of God because that's false, and no true atheist would do that. And then I quoted literally about 20, 30 definitions from various academic encyclopedias written by PhD atheists, written in textbooks used at Princeton, Cambridge, Oxford, and so on. And I was told, oh, so you're not willing to go and talk to real atheists. So, yeah. Anyway, so I thought atheists like science, but they're hypocrites because I was quoting the very best academic resources, the very best science, which has defined, which has studied the phenomenon and stated, okay, here are the common definitions. And every single definition went against his definition, utterly contradicted him. So that's atheists for you, completely irrational. So yeah, anyway, so this is where we ended up. Yeah, sorry to shock you guys with that discussion on turkeys and French gentlemen, but yeah, this is what you have when you have no moral center and you're not anchored to good biblical morals. Was he agnostic and confused? I mean, they're all confused. That's what I think. Atheism is horrendous, and we're going to see how Darwin just cranked it up to 11. Yeah, we ended up in the atheist sewer. Yeah, that is very, very true. Okay, so we ended our last show on Darwin on this section. Darwin is the universal asset that affects everything. And it's the review of the political gene, how Darwin's ideas changed politics. So I'll just do a quick review for those who missed it. And welcome. I see Just Janice. Have I mentioned names before? OT Genesis, Vegetal, most welcome. Jedediah Ramiel. So really great to see you. Prince Christian, excellent guys. Let me see who's... Okay, let's continue. According to evolutionist Daniel Dennett, Darwinism is the universal asset that affects everything. We've already determined Darwinism has been harnessed for sinister political ends because it seems to really suit totalitarian political ends. Darwin's role was critical in eugenics and Nazism. This, I think, we will establish in depth as we go through this presentation. Right? Darwin gave momentum to the human inferior-superior racial hierarchy, this racial divide, and he gave this theory the respectability of science. Luis Manuel Lopez, welcome. And Kami Benedit, Bendecida y Victoriosa. Thank you. Good to see you. And yeah, thanks for watching. Right, so let's have a look. Now, Darwin's son Leonard replaced his cousin Galton as chairman of the National Eugenics Society. Right? In the same year, an offshoot of the society was formed in Cambridge. Amongst leading members were 3 more of Charles Darwin's sons. So he says here that there is no doubt about the lineage of eugenics itself. It is something that came from Darwin, noting that in the years leading up to the First World War, the eugenics movement was a Darwin family business. Also note, the group's treasurer was a young economics lecturer by the name of John Maynard Keynes, whose younger brother Geoffrey would later marry Darwin's granddaughter, Margaret. So it's all in the family. John Maynard Keynes is the economist that messed up the world economy. Keynes' mother, Florence, and Horace Darwin's daughter, Ruth, sat together on the committee of the Cambridge Association for the Care of the Feeble-Minded, a front organization for eugenics. And it says here that he bends over backward to be fair and not misrepresent Darwin. Right? And he says here that Charles Darwin was an overt racist, and Darwin was a racist. And you could say, well, he was a man of his time. No, that was the science, right? That was the science. Jesus was never a racist. Jesus was a man of his time, right? He simply abided by eternal principles, which are good, as opposed to, oh, well, the science says I can kill my neighbor and take his stuff. Know or act. Welcome. So the extent that evolution is a universal acid, that it affects and even explains societal decay is covered in detail. So societal decay, Darwinism. Sewell shows it to some. Evolution even explains and justifies rape. And this again tells us why we have the situation where this philosopher that we spoke of said that rape is fine. Rape is okay. Right? They are getting ideas from Darwin. So atheists worship Darwin, but Darwin is this fountain, this spring of the worst, most toxic, disgusting ideas imaginable. Right? Let me continue. We discussed Ota Benga. Right? So we discussed Ota Benga. We mentioned he was the pygmy that was put on display in the Bronx Zoo in a locked cage with an orangutan named Dohang. They were about the same height. Right? 40,000 people came to visit. And the secretary of the zoo was an enthusiastic champion of eugenics. He hoped to use the display to proselytize his evolution views to the public, and the display caused the crowd to ask questions such as, was Ota Benga a monkey or a man? The zookeeper said that Ota was a transitional form between man and monkey. Let's have a look. Yeah, that's what the owner thought, right? The zookeeper thought. And he's the missing link. So in other words, a transitional animal between a monkey and a man, the famously elusive missing link. Yeah, this is what science said. And science is perfect. Science needs to replace religion because science good somehow. But no one's made an apology for this yet, to my knowledge. Evolutionists defended the display by saying that this is no more debatable than the multiplication table. Right? And then Haney Fairfield Osborne, one of the most esteemed American anthropologists, could not bring himself to include the African as a member of the human race. And Sewell documents the jump of eugenics from theory to politics and control. And they've mentioned here that they speak of, to the level of the higher evolved, technologically sophisticated whites. Now, again, don't take too much away, or don't take away from this what is not said here, right? Black people, I come from Africa, and let me tell you, black people are horrendously racist, right? I can tell you this bluntly. You want to see serious racism? Black people. Big time. So, now, they mention here, Sewell documents the jump, and the eugenics movement required an expansion of state agencies and an expansion of their scope for prying into and ultimately directing the lives of the poor, the welfare system. A system will also be established for the examination of the family history of all those placed on the register as being unquestionably mentally abnormal, said Leonard Darwin, in the family, right? Darwin's child, especially as regards the criminality, insanity, ill health, and so on. And we must make sure that those people, their behaviors die out. You know, we need to help them shuffle off this mortal coil. They justified rape. But yeah, yes, they do justify rape. We discussed it in the previous episode, where this one philosopher, this one atheist philosopher and scientist, legitimate scientist, stated that rape is acceptable. Yeah, it is incredibly racist. So, right. So let me see now. Let's just finish this article. A self-proclaimed social Darwinist, Pekka Erik Alvinen, a Finnish high school student, he murdered 8 people, including the school's head teacher on November 7th, 2007. He was concerned that humans had slowed or even reversed evolution in Western society. He wrote in his blog that the stupid, weak-minded people reproduce faster than intelligent, strong-minded people like himself. He carefully had thought through the philosophical implications of Darwin's argument and concluded that humans, like every other animal, have no special value because life was without purpose, the result of a long process of survival of the fittest evolution. His special plea was he hoped his actions would result in the role of social Darwinism to be taken more seriously. He chose his victims with care, trying to weed out those who were, in his judgment, the unfit. Even the Columbine killers were 2 amateur social Darwinists. And I know there were lots of conspiracy theories around the Columbine killer situation, but these were Darwinists. So Eric Harris wore a natural selection t-shirt on the day of the massacre, and both killers made remarks on video about helping natural selection. They also made frequent references to evolution, all ignored by the press. You don't have to go to aliens, anal probes inserted by aliens. They were Darwinists. They were atheists. So understand, this was all simply suppressed because, you know, Darwin good, atheists love Darwinism, Darwinism perfect. And this, unfortunately, drives a stake through the ugly vampire heart of atheism. And it shows that atheism itself inspires violence. Darwin's writings can lead to, or at least influence, very disturbing ways of thinking and behaving. And we're going to see it is the heart of Nazism. Their behavior is on a small scale, not unlike the attitudes once common in Nazi Germany. And that is an absolute fact. Sewell also discusses issues like abortion to produce fitter humans and government programs to control medical decisions based on modern soft eugenics. We discussed Richard Dawkins with his comments. Right? And let's see. Darwinism has been put at the pinnacle of media and scientific esteem, not by scientific fact or history, but by a vast, expensive public relations program paid for by tax dollars. Right? Yeah, so yes, of course, communism wanted the new man. The Nazis had the Übermensch. Yeah, so thank you. Questions and answers on Everyday Life in Ireland. Welcome. So Darwinism has caused dehumanization and has misled us in the past and in the present. And that, let me just see the last entry here. So this link, this article you can find very, very easily. It's free to download. The example he gives is a woman who aborted her first 2 children due to the fact that the sonogram of each showed an extra finger. The doctor in this case investigated and found that the mother had the very same condition. So the kids were born with an extra finger. The mother had the very same condition, which in her case was dealt with by a fairly minor operation. So this woman's mother had simply had a small operation done on the child and she was fine. This woman aborted 2 of her children because they had the same thing. The doctor reported that she chose to abort 2 children who had inherited her minor flaw, one that had few, if any, adverse consequences in her life. Disgusting. Utterly disgusting. Imagine her mother had aborted her, right? But now she believes that she has the right to choose to kill 2 babies because finger. Someone needs to give her the finger. I hope they gave her the finger afterwards. Okay, now, yeah, this was just amazing information. This on Okay, yeah. So yeah, I have a bunch of stuff coming up. Let me just go back here. By the way, this here is the hammer, or if not the exact hammer that Darwin used to murder hundreds of animals over a 5-year period on the Beagle and other places. This, yeah, this is at least very similar to the hammer. I think this is supposed to be the original hammer of Darwin's. I can't be exactly sure, but this, yeah, this is the Darwin, the Darwin killer's hammer. Um, okay, yeah, just one small change to a slide here, and let's just go. Okay, let's just start over. Let's run through the slides. Okay, we've already discussed this, that Hitler was a social Darwinist, right? And of course, atheists always invoke Darwinian science to undermine Christianity and promote this Darwinism, which is really just scientific genocide, scientific racism. Right, we discussed this. Notice this: eugenical sterilization in the United States. A report of the psychopathic laboratory of the Municipal Court of Chicago. Fascinating book. You can download it. But this is justification for eugenics that was being pushed through the courts. Let's just put it that way. Let's say a lot of people, especially black people in the U.S., have had to suffer from eugenic policies pushed through the U.S. courts. People have been sterilized. Lots of bad things have happened to them. So Darwinism is an anti-theistic ideology. It is not neutral. It is not science. It is simply anti-Christian. And Darwinism, as we said, gave scientific racism, which dehumanized people, the respectability and authority of science. So we can hate you and we can call you a monkey because it's science. So let's meet Emma, my Unitarian cousin wife. So Emma is Darwin's cousin wife. Who can think of a religion that has cousin wives? Cousin wives. I can't. There's one I know. There's a famous guy. He's in the Bible in Isaiah 42 or something. Cousin wives. Someone help me out here. So Darwin says, Islam, Ben Yosef. Yeah, give that man a prize. Someone give that man a prize. I found it more and more difficult with free scope given to my imagination to invent evidence which would suffice to convince me. Thus, disbelief crept over me at a very slow rate, but was at last complete. This is Darwin talking about him becoming an atheist. I know people love to say, but Darwin was an Anglican. No, he wasn't. We discussed that. That's not true. Okay? So, he says here, disbelief crept over me. I could no longer invent evidence, because he believes that Christians invented evidence for Christianity. Although I did not think much about the existence of a personal God until a considerably later period of my life, I will here give the vague conclusions to which I have been driven. The old argument from design in nature as given by Paley, which formerly seemed to me so conclusive, fails, now that the law of natural selection has been discovered. So in other words, the old argument from design that God designed the universe, that there is order and rationality within the universe because God created it, this fails because Darwin has created this theory of natural selection. So yes, he becomes God, effectively Joel Thomas. So this is Charles Darwin, autobiography, edited by his son Francis Darwin, who was also into eugenics, right, page 62. And William Paley, of course, was the famous he wrote natural theology, so he's a theologian, and he had written sort of a comprehensive thesis for what they called theistic evolution. But theistic evolution was a very common idea back then, where scientists, many of whom were religious, or at least spiritual, had created a synthesis of the biblical account with evolution. So this was a very much accepted idea, right? So Darwin had said that over a very long period, eventually he became a complete atheist, right? And when he says the argument from design in nature, he is referring here explicitly, and in many cases when Darwin speaks about his rejection of theistic evolution, he is explicitly refuting Thomas Aquinas. Okay, Thomas Aquinas. He's specifically going against the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas. Now, argument from design had been used for millennia. It's a very old argument, but is most commonly associated with the 19th century theologian William Paley and his 1802 book, Natural Theology, or Evidence of the Existence and Attributes of the Deity, collected from the appearances of nature. So Darwin was making an anti-theistic argument, an anti-Christian argument. This is Darwin's cousin wife. Darwin's cousin wife was a devout anti-Trinitarian or Unitarian who was upset by Darwin's lack of faith. Well, some might be upset by her particular lack of faith. She wanted to be with him beyond till death do us part. She knew that her cousin husband's doubts, and worried that his scientific investigations would deepen his doubts, condemning her to an eternity alone while he went to hell. Right? So biographers say that his cousin told him this often. Now, Christianity is false, extermination's okay. So the rate was so slow that I felt no distress, and I've never since doubted, even for a single second, that my conclusion was correct. So that's Darwin saying he never doubted that atheism was the correct choice. I can indeed hardly see how anyone ought to wish Christianity to be true. Now that's clearly, I think, let me see, if we work this out, if you think through the theology, that's definitely it's either Baptist or Calvinist position on Christianity. You say Christianity is not true if you're a Baptist or Calvinist, or maybe if you're an atheist. Probably atheist, I could be right. So understand, Darwin was very much an atheist. He disliked Christianity. He came to reject and ridicule Christianity. For if so, the plain language of the text seems to show that the men who do not believe, and this would include my father, brother, and almost all my best friends, will be everlastingly punished, and this is a damnable doctrine. He is saying that Christianity is a damnable doctrine. He's calling the Bible a damnable book by extension. Of course, God doesn't personally take you down to the pit and punch you in the face for the rest of eternity. If you're telling someone, look, if you follow this road, you're going to drive off a cliff, and you follow the road and you drive off a cliff, that isn't me punishing you. That is me warning you and saying, hey, take this road. This is safety. Take that road. You're going to kill yourself. You're going to get hurt. You're going to break your legs. That is not punishment. That's a warning. That's a fair warning saying, look, you have a choice. So, yeah. So let's continue. Now, look, I'm not going to put every anti-Christian quote that Darwin makes in one section alone, right? I'm going to be interspersing it throughout this presentation. So don't think that I've said everything there is to be said at any one point. I'm interspersing these points throughout as I go through the presentation. Charles Darwin, M.A., Fellow of the Royal Society, The Descent of Man. This is in Darwin's book. And he says here, at some future period, not very distant as measured by centuries, the civilized races of man will almost certainly exterminate and replace the savage races throughout the world. That's Darwin writing. So let me see, the civilized races. Who were the civilized races at the time of Darwin? That would be Europe, all right? Who adopted Darwinism? Well, let's think. The French Revolution, because Darwin was very much into the Enlightenment. And of course, so he was saying the civilized races, and most specifically the Germans here. Unfortunately, the Germans stepped up to the plate and went to town on this. So the civilized races of man, those are the most enlightened, right? The Germans. They decided, yes, they would exterminate and replace what they called the savage races throughout the world. Thank heavens I wasn't around then, not living in Africa back then, because maybe I would have had a bullet to the head. Who knows? So, right, let's continue. All right, Darwin, the Secret Atheist. Now, this is The Dark Side of Charles Darwin, a critical analysis of an icon of science, and the Darwin legend. Okay, a couple of books here. So Darwin knew that his evolution theory not only supported atheism, but atheism was a logical result of his theory, which is why, of course, atheists love this stuff. But Darwin is literally saying that the superior, that's you, well, I'm superior because, I don't know, because I think so, right? We need to wipe out the lesser people. That's what he teaches. So atheists want to claim that Christianity leads to violence, while Darwinism endorses, in fact, it is critical for survival of the superior race. So let me see. Although Darwin personally discouraged militant arguments against religion because they supposedly have little effect on the public, he nevertheless indirectly supported their use of his theory to propagate atheism. That's Hiram Caton, The Darwin Legend, Queensland Institute of Medical Research, 2008, page 3. That's the Darwin Legend right here. Murder. So, yes. Kami, murder. Correct. But you see, Darwin said that whatever helps one group survive that is moral. Whatever helps you survive and prosper is moral. Therefore, in Darwinism, that is morality, that is correct, that is good. An example is in 1880, Darwin wrote a letter to atheist Edward Aveling, and there's a link here, of course, to Marx in terms of that, but let's not go there now, saying, "It appears to me, whether rightly or wrongly, that direct arguments against Christianity and theism produce hardly any effect on the public." Darwin added that instead of arguing directly against Christianity, the task of converting people to atheism is best promoted by the gradual illumination of men's minds, that Illuminati term, which follow from the advance of science, i.e. evolution. It has therefore been always my object to avoid writing on religion for publication, and for this reason I have confined myself to science. In other words, he worked from the shadows. He worked silently. Don't forget, I just did a talk on atheism on Sam Shamoun's channel last week, on Thursday, where I discussed Lenin, and Lenin stated, we should not always, at least not at first, we should not directly attack Christianity. We need to ally with them, infiltrate, and subvert them. And that's kind of where Darwin's going. So you could think that he got this from Marx, perhaps, because this seems a little bit Marxist. And then, of course, these ideas made their way to Lenin and the Soviets. So there's a certain parallel here. So beware. Atheism is like Islam, except that atheism has no sects. Peace is an option, but only if you're an atheist. Yes, the French Revolution was atheism or death. Become an atheist, convert to atheism, the religion of atheism, or die. You find a lost page of Darwin's theory, Johnny Bravo. Okay, check my email later. Actually, hold on, let me check that now. Let me see. Must be, no, not yet. I've got some interesting emails, but yeah. Okay, so yes, he wrote that to pretend in front of Christians they support Christianity and work to destroy people of faith and turn them to atheism slowly. Yes. So understand, this is the common atheist mantra. Darwin was a nasty piece of work, a very nasty. Darwin once said that he was with the atheists in thought, even though he preferred to call himself an agnostic, as opposed to an atheist, possibly in deference to his devout cousin wife. April 23rd, 1851, Annie Darwin dies. Now, this is not just about Annie Darwin, but this seems to be the one incident that really shook him and his family, right? Darwin's mother died when he was young, and apparently this had a massive impact on his emotional state, right? It really rocked his world. Then he lost 3 of his children, right? They died. Annie was the one that he really seemed to care about the most, and this one had the biggest effect on him. So he had multiple children die, and then also his son's wife died during childbirth. Apparently they were close. She was well-liked. His son's wife died. His son never recovered, never remarried. His son was an emotional wreck after that. Darwin as well, as we've mentioned and hinted at and we'll discuss, Darwin was physically and emotionally also unwell. He used to get panic attacks. The man had serious emotional and physical medical issues as well. So he was not a stable personality. Darwin experienced a great deal of personal loss. The death of Amy Darwin in childbirth traumatized his son. Darwin also suffered from severe health issues and depression, with a fragile physical and emotional state. Darwin's beloved oldest daughter, Annie, died just after turning 10. He was deeply overcome with grief, and it had a profound effect on him. This is Annie here, and this is his cousin wife here, right? This is his cousin wife as a young woman, his cousin wife as an older woman. Historian Deborah Heiligman says Annie's death changed things between Charles and Emma. Right? Darwin became more willing to proclaim his theories and his religious doubts. The death of Annie was so much the worst thing that could happen to them, and they survived it, that it was almost like anything else paled in comparison. In On the Origin of Species, Leander Haupt says, you can see the influence of Annie's death in his shaping of that book. He knew so deeply and so personally and viscerally what death was now after Annie's loss. And yet in his writing, you see him affirming over and over this circle, the endless unfolding of life. But remember, he made death the most important thing. Death is what brought greatness. Death is what brought life. Death is what brought development. He was worshipping, effectively, death as the source of life. So really, this Darwinism, death cult. In the last pages of On the Origin of Species, some say Darwin confronts the meaning of Annie's demise. Darwin takes his readers to a beautiful forest rich with trees and birds, singing everywhere, and reminds us of the beauty we see every day in things like butterflies and flowers. It demonstrates especially that humans who can contemplate and love these things are all products of millions of years of competition, struggle, famine, and death. Again, death cult. And that this struggle will continue. But this is a very false impression of nature. Nature is not just about hunting and killing and dying all the time. It is not psychopathic. So if life will keep evolving, new forms and new shapes. Death is what brings life. So he was promoting death. The problem of evil. So this is kind of what bothered Darwin. Distraught. He was distraught over his mother's death. This is Darwin on God by G.W. Foote. His son's wife dies in childbirth. He sees the lifetime impact on his son. 3 of his 10 children died young. Mary Eleanor lived 23 days. Charles has Down syndrome, dies at 18 months. Writing to Dr. Asa Gray in 1860, Darwin writes a strong objection to theism. I own that I cannot see as plainly as others do, and as I should wish to do, evidence of design and beneficence on all sides of us. He only sees God as nasty, God as killing his children. He sees God as evil. There seemed to me too much misery in the world. I cannot persuade myself that a beneficent and omnipotent God would have designedly created the Ichneumonidae with the express intention of their feeding within the living bodies of caterpillars, or that a cat should play with mice. So this idea of Ichneumonidae is simply a parasite that buries its larvae inside of caterpillars. They hatch and then eat the caterpillar alive. All right? And this we find here on Darwin Online. See why that did not load. Okay, I probably need to find the word Ichneumonidae. So there we go, Ichneumonidae, and we'll find it here somewhere. So the reference is going to be here somewhere, right? So that would be within his notes. Now, that there is much suffering in the world, no one disputes. Some have attempted to explain this with reference to man by imagining that it serves for his moral improvement. But the number of men in the world is as nothing compared with that of all other sentient beings, and they often suffer greatly without any moral improvement. Well, animals are not going to suddenly turn into Einsteins. This very old argument from the existence of suffering against the existence of an intelligence first cause seems to me a strong one. Again, he's going expressly against the argument made by Thomas Aquinas. He's going against the argument from design. When he speaks of the first cause, actually, let me find you that, just so that we know what we're all talking about here. Okay, so let me just show you this, what I'm referring to here. So these are the 5 ways that this is theological reasoning developed by Thomas Aquinas. The last one here is the argument from design, and then the argument from motion and efficient causes. So let's quickly step forward. The argument from motion. Aquinas argues that everything in the world is in motion and that nothing can move itself. Therefore, there must be a first mover, an unmoved mover, which we call God. And Aquinas states in the argument from efficient causes, everything in the world has a cause, and nothing can be the cause of itself. This chain of causes cannot go on infinitely, so there must be a first cause, an uncaused cause, which we call God. And then, of course, you have the argument from design. Aquinas argues that the natural order and purposeful arrangement found in the universe suggests the existence of an intelligent designer. This designer, who we call God, is responsible for the intricate design and purposeful functioning of the world. So understand, Darwin is here explicitly going after the Catholic Church. He's going after the thinking and the logic that eventually led to science, because this is the scholastic method. Of course, we all know that Martin Luther called reason, which is critical and underpins the scholastic method, he called it the enemy of God. Reason was the enemy of God. Reason was the whore of Satan. Reason was a prostitute. Reason was to be trampled. All right. Inbreeder. Scientific American. Charles Darwin's family tree tangled with inbreeding and early death. Catherine Harmon, May 3, 2010. Charles Darwin's studies of heredity, adaptation, and evolution included many experiments into the effects of crossbreeding and inbreeding in both plants and animals. And often this resulted in weaker, more sickly descendants. His own lineage and marriage could have been experiments as well. At the age of 29, he proposed to his cousin, Emma Wedgwood, the daughter of his mother's brother. Darwin realized the dangers of inbreeding and wondered if his close genetic relation to his wife had an ill impact on his children's health, 3 of 10 of whom died before the age of 11. In a letter to a friend, Darwin noted his concern for his children, writing that they are not very robust. Like the English royal bloodline, for a scientist, he is pretty stupid, Rachel Bonnet. Yes. So inbreeder. Darwin's marriage to his cousin was not the only mixing of blood in the two lines. The Darwin-Wedgwood family, in fact, had several instances of close family matches. So there were generations of inbreeding between these two families. Yeah, no, inbreeding does cause, Vlad, correct, it does cause damage. It causes biological damage eventually. It has measurable biological effects. The analysis led by Tim Berra, Professor Emeritus in the Department of Evolution, Ecology and Organismal Biology at the Ohio State University in Mansfield, I had to put that in there, found that Darwin's children did have a moderate level of inbreeding, and in the family's children there was a significant positive association between child mortality and inbreeding. Science said it, so hey, I'm not going to argue with science, right? That guy sounds like he's a scientist. And consanguineous marriages lead to deafness and dumbness and blindness, etc. Darwin wrote in a letter to parliamentarian John Lubbock in 1870. Fascinating. So he knew that inbreeding, the heels of eyes, exactly. Don't, take a gun if you go down that river, right? A family of sick people, very sick people. He wrote to Dr. Gray from Southampton in 1862, "We are a wretched family. We ought to be exterminated." Fascinating. So my family ought to be exterminated. That's really positive. Could he have killed his child with Down syndrome? Natalie, that question has occurred to me. Look, I'm not going to hazard an answer. I don't think we can legitimately answer. I know that, for instance, Marx was a devout Marxist at Marx's death. Engels gave a speech which included Darwin, gave a speech which referenced Darwin at Marx's funeral. And Marx had 2 children that he let starve to death. So 2 babies that he let die that way. So, look, I mean, you tell me, we're a wretched family, we ought to be exterminated. Many among Victorian upper crust had preferred to share bed with their kin. Charles's grandfather, Josiah Wedgwood, set up a home with his 3rd cousin. Their daughter, Susanna, chose Robert Darwin, Charles's father. Charles's uncle, Emma's father, had 9 offspring, 4 of whom married cousins. So of 9 kids, 4 of them married cousins. Darwin's own marriage was happy, with 10 children, and when his wife was in her 40s, Darwin wrote that Emma has been very neglectful of late, for we have not had a child for more than 1 whole year. Even so, in Queen Victoria's best days, the Darwin-Wedgwood dynasty did less well than most, for among the 62 uncles, cousins, and aunts, Emma and Charles included, who descended from Josiah, 38 had no progeny that survived to adulthood. So, of 62 members of the Darwin family, 38 of them had no children that survived to adulthood. Their children died. This is a wealthy family, a well-to-do family. So, in other words, the inbreeding had so weakened their bloodline that this had caused damage and the children died young. Stephen Young says, "Just want to say I appreciate this amazing content." Well, thank you very much. So, 6 years after his wife's last child, Darwin began to think about the dangers of inbreeding, in particular as they applied to his own choice of spouse. His concern was picked up from his cousin, Francis Galton, who coined the term eugenics. Did not invent eugenics, Darwin invented eugenics, who had pointed out the potential dangers of marriage within the clan. So Darwin was anxious about his children. His 10th and last died while a baby. And Darwin says he was backward in walking and talking, but intelligent and observant. He had Down syndrome. Henrietta had a digestive illness, not unlike that of her father, who was prone to stress-induced vomiting. So Darwin was induced to stress-induced vomiting. The man he had panic attacks and he worried. And she took to her bed for years. His son Leonard was rather slow and backward. He became a eugenicist. He later married his own cousin, becoming president of the Eugenics Society. Horace had attacks many times a day of shuddering and gasping and hysterical sobbing, semi-convulsive movements with much distress or feeling. Could be possessed, hell, I don't know. His daughter Elizabeth had shivers and makes as many extraordinary grimaces as ever. Okay, so not so well upstairs. George's problem was an irregular pulse, which hinted at some deep flaw in his constitution. So Darwin realized his own genes screwed his children's chances of survival, And his children don't sound all that a little bit loopy. I just found out Marx left his two babies to starve. Yes, yeah, the stuff you don't know about Marx. Trust me, there's so much ugliness in Marx's life. Yeah. Now, the evolution of poetry. So Darwin is stating what we now call the existential dilemma, says Gopnik in his biography of Darwin. There are two things that are true. One is that everything dies, and things die for no reason and to no apparent end. That's that little discussion about Darwin and the forest and the beautiful butterflies. And their death is painful. And that process of living and dying produces something amazing and beautiful and astonishing. Darwin writes, there is grandeur in this view of life. From so simple a beginning, endless forms, most beautiful and most wonderful, have been and are being evolved. Well, but life continues through death. So this poetic imagery takes us to Erasmus Darwin, who lived from 1731 to 1802, grandfather of Charles Darwin. He was a leading philosopher, naturalist, scientist, basically amateur scientist, and physician in the 18th century. And he wrote one of the first books on evolution called Zoonomia, or the Laws of Organic Life, 1795-ish. Okay? Erasmus believed in species self-improvement through constant adaptation. Sorry, that's a mistake. Adaptation is not a word, people. Adaptation to the environment. And he called it transformism or transmutation. You know, being trans, yeah, transformism. Life consisted of one living filament connecting all forms to a common ancestor. Yeah, guys, if you enjoy the content, please do share, like, tell people about it. I do appreciate that, people share the content. Right, so now, how Erasmus Darwin's poetry prophesied evolutionary theory. So understand, remember I said in the beginning that Darwin's ideas of evolution was not he looked at the science and came up with an idea. The idea had been in his family for at least 2 generations, and prior to them, it had been amongst these Greek pagans, these mythicists. So it was within the poetry, and Darwin was trying to find a way to justify it. And I mean, this is a fascinating how Darwin's... Let me just go back here. Right, so let me bring up this little article here. How Erasmus Darwin's poetry prophesied evolutionary theory. So understand what they were doing was they were taking myth, which they were describing through poetry, and they were using this to somehow prove evolution. He writes here, though he died before his grandson Darwin was born, Erasmus Darwin anticipated the theory of evolution, albeit in poetic form. So, and he called it the temple of nature, which is so much like the French philosophers in the French Revolution. The temple of nature, the worship of nature. So, pantheism. Organic life beneath the shoreless waves was born and nursed in ocean's pearly caves. First forms minute, unseen by spheric glass, move on the mud or pierce the watery mass. These, as successive generations bloom, new powers acquire and larger limbs assume, whence countless groups of vegetation spring and breathing realms of fin and feet and wing. Does that sound like Darwin? Does that sound like Darwin? Yes, it does. So, in other words, his grandfather's poetry, Darwin was trying to find a way to turn this poetry into science. Andrew Martin says, transhumanism is an escape from life by uploading into a computer. Like getting into one of the pods in the Matrix movie, yeah. So this verse, they says, demonstrate the prescience of the imaginative arts. How poetic dreams can foreshadow empirical reality. He's just making myth. He's taking myth and he's trying to make it true. Darwin was recognized as the leading English poet of the day. Now, the last I checked, poetry is known as fiction, but somehow this is not supposed to be science. Transforming from A to B, so organic life beneath the shoreless waves was born and nursed in ocean's pearly caves, right? And as successive generations bloom, new powers acquire and larger limbs assume. So there you go, that's your poetry. The Temple of Nature by Charles Darwin. Now, of course, let's have a look at the Muslims, right? They're never far behind. Look at the Sufis. Let's go here to Mr. Rumi. I died as mineral and became a plant. I died as plant and rose to animal. I died as animal and I was a man. Why should I fear when was I less by dying? Or when was I less by dying? In other words, when you die, something greater comes forth. Remember in the very first episode we mentioned, Darwin speaks about how greater things come forth through death. So yes, they pushed atheism through poetry. They claimed that mythology was science. So why should I fear? When was I less by dying? See, he was trying to also justify his daughter's death, I believe. Right? Yet once more I shall die as man, to soar with angels blessed, but even from angelhood I must pass on. All except God must perish. When I have sacrificed my angel soul, I shall become what no mind ever conceived. Oh, let me not exist, for non-existence proclaims in organ tones. To him we shall return. So do you see the parallels here with the Sufi poetry? Right? This is the Gnostic poetry, if you will, of the Sufis, and how that links in with Darwin's grandfather. And Kush says, wait, isn't that Buddhism with extra steps? Yeah, probably. I'd say there's a fairly good, I would say so. Yeah, fine. I mean, this is, it's, so they also attempted to subconsciously ingrain woke communism into the minds of university students. So that's been going on for a while. We've discussed that. So that's what everyone believes. Everyone is a god. Yes, everyone becomes God. Everyone merges with God. But we know that within the Christian idea, God remains God. We might be the children of God, but we are not God ourselves, right? We might go to paradise and live there, but we are not God. We are distinct from God. Yeah, to him we shall return is a promise from the Quran. Exactly. This is Rumi, okay? So that's Rumi. So Erasmus Darwin, of course, was a Freemason, and he was in the ancient accepted Scottish Rite. In 1755, Brother Erasmus Darwin formed the Lunar Society, the Moon Society, the Moon. Who knows of a religion that has a moon going on? Hang on. It's on top of every one of their temples. Hang on, they got a moon on top of every temple, and they claim they got nothing to do with the moon. Who can think of a religion that has that? So he forms the Lunar Society, meeting at the full moon. Members were lunatics. Islam, ding, 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 we have a winner again. A leading figure is Matthew Bolton. In 1776, he's recorded planning to make many motions to the members respecting new laws and new regulations such as will tend to prevent the decline of a society, which I hope will be lasting. So in other words, this eugenic movement wanted to entrench itself in law. This has not stopped. And he says here, the Empress of Russia is now at my house, which is a really odd statement. The Empress of Russia is now at my house. She was a big supporter of the French philosophes. She funded one of the French philosophes. She bought his collection of stuff when he went bankrupt. She was in many ways very supportive of the ideas of the French Revolution. So, moving to Derby, England in 1788, he became a Mason at Canongate Kilwinning Lodge No. 2 in Scotland. His activity is not known, but Masonry continued in his family with his son Francis Darwin and his later descendant Reginald Darwin. And that's according to the Scottish Rite Boston on their website. Darwin had been a Freemason throughout his life. This is Erasmus Darwin, right? Not Charles. Right? In the time immemorial lodge of Canongate, No. 2 of Scotland. Later, Sir Francis Darwin. Matthew, wow, thank you very much. Appreciate the donation. So one of his sons was made a Mason. So one of Charles Darwin's sons was made a Mason in Tyrian Lodge No. 253 at Derby in 1807 or 1808. His son Reginald was made a Mason in 1804. And Darwin wrote of the three great objects of desire for every organism. And I think this is Erasmus Darwin, right? Lust, hunger, and security. So the three things that are very important are lust, hunger, and security. I think we opened up the session today on lust, involving turkeys. Oh yeah, turkeys and geese. Not a pleasant thought. So lust, hunger, and security. Charles Darwin's name does not appear, but it is very possible that he, like Francis, was a Mason. Now that reference is from Wikipedia. Now, Wikipedia, I mean, you got to take it with a grain of salt. There is no evidence, but Darwin's family was very much involved in Masonry. So, was he? We can't say definitively. I don't know that that's possible, but we can't exclude it either. So, hedonism, yes, Joel. So, evolution long before Darwin. So now we've got 18th century. The 18th century confronts the gods by Frank E. Manuel. In the Darwin family, the menfolk took for granted the self-evident truths of Enlightenment skepticism. They were Enlightenment thinkers, right? In other words, French Revolution, they were crazy. And don't forget, the Enlightenment thinkers were atheists and they were occultists. How you are an occultist and an atheist at the same time is beyond me, but normally I think atheism is just a cover for all sorts of satanic and occult behavior. Their skepticism towards Christianity included an evolutionary account directed against the Christian biblical doctrine of creation by God. This was a presupposition within the Darwin family. Darwin absorbed evolutionary doctrines that had been discussed for centuries, traced back to the Roman philosopher Lucretius. The idea was significantly formed long before Darwin discovered it. So this idea, this particular myth of evolution, that as they deemed it, as they pushed it, was around for 2,000 years before Darwin. So let's see any questions I've missed. Natalie Hart says, I agree that atheism was a cover for Satanism. Yeah, I mean, if you look at many of the Satanists, they'll claim they are atheists. It's satanic atheism or atheist Satanism. It's crazy. Yeah. So now, he was a third-generation evolutionist. He read Erasmus's Zoonomia early on, so Darwin was very, very familiar with his grandfather's work. He studied under the radical evolutionist Robert Grant while in medical school. And also the French evolutionist Lamarck, I made a typo here again, obviously, and would have, so he and the French evolutionist Lamarck would have discussed evolution with his father and brother before setting foot on the Beagle. So Darwin was steeped in these ideas that came from the French Revolution. Anything but God, anything to destroy the idea of creation, anything to refute the Bible. Evolution was a philosophical and cultural idea long before Charles Darwin went in search of evidence to support it. It was a very particular philosophical and cultural inheritance, one that he'd inherited, one that he'd been steeped in. And that championed the Whig history of rational secular progress over irrational religious superstition. So within their thinking, by default, religion is irrational. Atheism means rationality. Charles Darwin's account of religion as an irrational reflex of ignorance and fear in the descent of man was thoroughly hashed out during the 17th and 18th centuries. A revival of ancient Greek and Roman pagan philosophical views, and we're going to dive into that downgraded all religion to foolish superstition. These views were revived by the Enlightenment and used directly against Christianity. And of course, Darwin was looking to use these ideas, again, against Christianity to destroy it. Yeah, they practice Satanism, and that's ironic, I know. So the atheistic coat of arms and crest. So Erasmus Darwin added an evolutionary decoration to the family coat of arms. He put 3 scallop shells on the motto, E conscious omnia, all things out of shells, all things from the ocean. Cryptic Latin for his belief that life evolved from a common ancestor. That was in his poetry. All things come from one ancestor. Charles's father Robert adopted E conscious omnia in the 1790s as his own motto, displaying it on his bookplate. Right? E conscious omnia, that's the little quote here. Robert kept his views private. He had no wish for the notoriety as a radical that Erasmus Darwin had. Now, a man called the Reverend Seward, the father of Erasmus's biographer to be, Anna Seward, saw the cryptic motto and immediately accused Erasmus of being a modern Epicurus, which is a significant charge at the time in that society, since it meant being hedonist and atheist as well as an evolutionist. If you're an Epicurean, then of course many atheists trace their philosophy, their thinking, to this pagan Greek Epicurus, right, to Lucretius as well. And this meant that you rejected the norms of society. It meant that you would hang out with turkeys and geese. And that's why lots of atheists claim to just be agnostic or don't say anything, because it's, at the time, it was very, very embarrassing. Thanks. I don't think any university would ever invite you to give lectures because you speak the truth. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to happen anytime soon, right? I was kicked out of one university class for discussing Islam by reading the Sharia, but just opening the books of ISIS and reading it, providing references in the forum, and I got kicked out because they don't want the facts. So yeah. So this sudden discovery brought Erasmus to hide away his views for another 20 years before bringing them to light again in his publication of Zoonomia in 1794. Because being an atheist then was to be antisocial, was literally to go against society and destroy and undermine society. That's Desmond King Hill, Erasmus Darwin, A Life of Unequaled Achievement, page 89. Thomas Seward, canon of nearby Lichfield Cathedral, noticed it and accused Erasmus of having renounced his creator as an atheist. He wrote a satirical poem about Erasmus, part of which read, "Great wizard, he, by magic spells, can all things raise from cockle shells." So he calls Erasmus Darwin a wizard. who was using magic spells and who believed that all things, all life, came out of cockle shells. So it's odd that he uses this term wizard. It's really, really weird that he uses the term wizard. Does he mean something by magic spells? So does he know something we don't? Is he alluding to something that we should be aware of regarding magic? And the first cause is not God, Erasmus Darwin, E conscious omnia, Erasmus Darwin, you can see here. Would it be too bold to imagine that in the great length of time since the earth began to exist, perhaps millions of ages before the commencement of the history of mankind, would it be too bold to imagine that all warm-blooded animals have arisen from one living filament, which the great first cause endued with animality? So the great first cause, what is the great first cause? Well, Darwin said we don't know. It's purely material, but it's not God. So understand now, they're taking the ideas of St. Thomas Aquinas and they're co-opting them. They're trying to undermine these ideas by using the term, but now assigning a different meaning and value to it. And so the great first cause endued with animality, with the power of acquiring new parts, attended with new propensities, new abilities, directed by irritations, sensations, volitions, and associations, and thus possessing the faculty of continuing to improve by its own inherent activity, and of delivering down those improvements by generation to its posterity. World without end, Erasmus Darwin, Zoonomia. So, delivering those improvements down to posterity, world without end. Isn't that a little bit of a world without end? Doesn't that sound like something that you say in church at any time? So, of course, this was the new religion. So they were trying to co-opt religion and install a new religion, an atheistic religion based on material life from nothing, right? Life from matter. So how did life spring from non-life? That was their claim. And so they're adding a certain philosophical, religious spin to this. Yeah, just recall how Robert Spencer was pilloried for speaking the truth regarding Mohammedans. Yep, you won't be invited in mainstream media to discuss Islam. No, I don't think so. So yeah, makes sense here. This is copying or stealing from religion, but it's trying to add its own spin to it. And so I understand these ideas long before Darwin was alive. These ideas were already in place. This mythology was already in place. It was considered mythology then because, as we saw, it's very much... I only showed one quote from Rumi. There's plenty of Muslim quotes that talk about this stuff as myth that the Muslims were pushing. And the Muslims got it from the Greeks as well, from these Greek pagans. So it's crazy how they were pushing the very same ideas and then claiming this was science. So Darwin just took mythology and called it science. Matthew Velasquez, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it. Thank you, says, for exposing this. Yeah, I mean, what are you guys learning from this? What are you taking away? The coat of arms of Darwin. Now, this is not very pretty, but this is the Darwin coat of arms from the 1970s. But this is Darwin, the city in Australia. Not the man. This is not Charles Darwin. This is Darwin, the city in Australia. You're welcome. Sorry, that was just a... Sorry, that was a joke. Okay, I'm going to move now. Atheist favorites, Epicurus and Lucretius. I cannot understand why you scientific people make such a fuss about Darwin. Why? It's all in Lucretius. Victorian educator and poet Matthew Arnold to a biology professor in 1871. So this is Matthew Arnold here, and this is Lucretius over here. All right. Now, the pagan materialist Epicurus and Roman follower Lucretius, so he was a Greek and then Lucretius Roman, right? The entire mystery of the world's complexity was found in different shapes and objects generated at random by the chance interaction of elements. Life and mind, the unsubstantiated claim went, originated as emergent properties of particular types of atomic configuration. Hold on. So when certain atomic configurations occur, life, right, organic life and mind, consciousness arise. And they called this atomism. And Epicurus is pictured with his other disciple, Carl Pagan. Now, there's a reason I call this Carl Pagan. We're going to be talking about Carl Pagan in a moment. More on that later. Okay, we'll be talking. So this is Epicurus and Carl Pagan. Joel Thomas, that was a joke. This is Carl Sagan. But for our purposes, he is Carl Sagan. He's now Carl Pagan. Okay, Lucretius got his physics from atomist Sophus. He was the original redditor. Yeah. So of course, so now understand these. So the pagan materialist Epicurus and his Roman follower Lucretius made these claims 2,000 plus years ago. Right. So Darwin wasn't doing anything new. And as Matthew Arnold said, why are you people making such a fuss about Darwin? This is all from Roman pagan mythology. This is all from Roman pagan poetry, for that matter. Right. I mean, this stuff is like mythology that's been around forever. So nature had evolved spontaneously. And here when we say spontaneously, we can say magically. Magic. Spontaneous, right? In other words, the atheist claim is give us one free miracle and we'll explain all the rest. Just give us that one free miracle. So nature had evolved spontaneously into more complex combinations driven by purely contingent occurrences. No God, of course. And Darwin had stated, if God comes into the equation of evolution, then it's useless to me. It's worthless to me. Plants and animals had evolved via a long process of trial and error, which Darwin called natural selection. Epicurus conceived of nature as an aggregate of material entities operated by blind and unvarying natural laws. So Darwin was an Epicurean. Darwin was a Lucretian. So Darwin was doing nothing original. Darwin simply added a bunch of finch beaks and killed a bunch of birds and animals with hammers and rocks, right? And called it science. Did Darwin confess on his deathbed that he was wrong about God? I heard that. Now, that story is very controversial. It is extremely controversial. Atheists deny it. His family denies it. However, there's evidence that it might be true. Okay, there's evidence that it might actually be true. At least there's something to it. There's more to the story than we are told. There is certainly something there, but I'm not going to get into that because, I mean, yeah. But let's just say that there might be a story there. For Lucretius, gods did exist, but inhabited a separate intermundia or intermediate realm where they remained indifferent to human concerns. So they were deists, right? The God was like, he started up the world and wandered off and got lost and fell down a cliff and bumped his head and hasn't woken up since, right? Like the Marquis de Sade, Epicurus is known for his teachings on pleasure, right? So hedonism, just like we had with the geese and the turkeys in the beginning, they are all about physical pleasure. So atomism was not neutral science or an unbiased philosophical perspective. It was activism, psychological therapy that Athenian fellow citizens he deemed oppressed by cosmic forces of which the gods were the personifications. I see I have a few typos here. So atomism is not neutral science or an unbiased philosophical perspective. It's an activism and a psychological therapy. And of course, when you read through the atheist stuff, especially the satanic stuff, they'll tell you that we're providing psychological therapy, a form of release. We're providing pleasure. We're providing, relief and sustenance emotionally to people. This is exactly the same idea. It comes out of the Greek paganism, right? So Athenian fellow citizens he deemed oppressed by cosmic forces of which the gods were the personifications. So yeah, we need to affirming therapy. Thank you, Vishal. That's a very nice way to put it. Yeah. So Lucretius, De Rerum Natura. Pieces of Darwin's ideas had been expressed throughout the early 19th century by James Pritchard, William Wells, William Lawrence, Patrick Matthew, and Edward Blyth, then by the anonymous author of Vestiges, the journalist Robert Chambers, whose identity was not revealed until 1884. So these ideas had been around for a while. Hedonism as usual, yes. So it's about being able to do what you want, as you want, without limitation, without moral restriction. So the theory of evolution was around in the 1st century BC. More godless psychologists, less priests, yeah. But you see, if you are the pinnacle of creation, if you are the ultimate being, if you are God, because according to the nature of the universe, you are the highest creation, then you are God, why should you have restrictions? That's what they are referring to. It's a very, very narcissistic worldview. So the Epicurean philosopher Lucretius, who lived from 99 to 55 BC, provided atheists with a full-blown evolutionary account mapping out stage by stage how randomly jostling atoms had produced everything in the universe up to man. So now you've got this atheist mythologist, this pagan, who had come up with an idea that scientists and atheists today insist is true. How do you have a pagan idea that atheists are now insisting is science? I don't know how you square the circle here, but they are literally claiming that this paganism is scientific. And that's what Darwin did. He gave this mythological paganism the veneer of science. Matthew Velasquez, thank you very much. I appreciate the support. Lucretius was the darling of the 18th century philosophers. He provided deists, that's the French Enlightenment philosophers, right? He provided deists and atheists with a secular response to the Christian scheme of creation and salvation. European intelligentsia had been aware of evolutionary thought for greater than 100 years. Straight out of paganism, Pedro Jr., that is correct. It's straight out of paganism. Lucretius wrote an epic poem to explain the tenets of Epicurean philosophy on the nature of the universe, or on the nature of things. Lucretius subverts the norms of epic, yet there is a quest and an epic hero, Epicurus, who has revealed to mankind the secret of life. That is, not to worry about death. Darwin claims that death is how you promote life, right? How you bring greater things. That death reveals the ultimate creation. But also you see you guys like Dawkins talking about, yeah, don't worry about death, just go on. You see atheists talking about all the time. Atheists are merely lip-syncing a bunch of pagan Greek and Roman philosophers, mythicists from the BC era, from 2,500 years ago. So instead, they're not being scientific. They're merely trying to pretend that this paganism is science. Romanticism and Victorianism on the Net. Epic Poetry and the Origins of Evolutionary Theory by John Holmes. So this is called Romanticism and Victorianism, Spring Fall, special issue on the two Darwins. Right? Guest edited by Martin Priestman and Louis Lee of the University of Roehampton. Darwin's Debt to Lucretius of the Nature of Things, De Rerum Natura. A poem, not a science textbook, a frickin' poem, that recasts natural philosophy as an epic endeavor is relatively well known. He signals Lucretius's presence within the poem through a second address, this time to love. So understand this is really just epic poetry. It is not science, but these atheists have rejected God, they've rejected the Bible, they need to find themselves another myth because people are going to bind themselves to some kind of belief, and this is what they chose, paganism. Yes, Stephen Young, you will completely cease to exist, and life is meaningless, but don't worry about it. So yeah, world without end. So again, I mean, Erasmus Darwin stole from the church, right? Stealing liturgical language. Dawkins is a known death cultist. Yes, that is true. So Martin Priestman has pointed out in the electronic edition of Darwin's poem that this passage echoes Milton's address to the Holy Spirit with mighty wings outspread and so on at the beginning of Paradise Lost, and Lucretius' address to Venus at the beginning of The Nature of Things. So they are trying to take paganism, just like the Enlightenment thinkers of the French Revolution, all of them were reading pagan philosophers, right? So all of them are just into paganism. It's just the same paganism dressed up as science. It's pretense. Now, Humanities and Social Science Communications in the journal Nature. This is like the most prestigious journal of its kind, science journal in the world. From one Darwin to another, Charles Darwin's annotations to Erasmus Darwin's The Temple of Nature. So now you've got here, of the nature of things, you've got this pagan Greek philosopher that is loved by atheists, right? Writing about nature, and I mean, if we go back here, whose wide arms in soft embraces hurled round the vast frame, connecting the whirling world, whether immersed in day, the sun, blah, 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 whatever, poetry. But it's science, because it's poetry. And then, in the history of evolutionary thought, it has often been said that ideas on the transformation of species found in the work of Erasmus Darwin, as set forth in his The Temple of Nature, inspired his grandson's theory of evolution. Little historical evidence has been produced to back up this claim, but based on a physical examination of Charles Darwin's own copy of The Temple of Nature, this paper presents the 25 markings Darwin made in the book as evidence of his interest in and familiarity with Erasmus Darwin's ideas. Because people were trying to say, no, Darwin was not influenced by his grandfather's poetry. That Darwin wasn't creating a science of evolution based on poetry. No, that never happened. Well, this paper proves the opposite. Darwin was very intimately familiar with his grandfather's work. So his interest and familiarity with Erasmus Darwin's ideas on the change over time across species. This finding contradicts previous statements reporting only 2 annotations. Now, why would they make such a mistake? Which suggested he had little to no interest in the book. This paper purposes that Charles Darwin's annotations indicate his and his grandfather's shared interest in the competition for reproduction, sexual selection, and point to a more remarkable resemblance between Erasmus Darwin's The Temple of Nature and Charles Darwin's The Descent of Man, rather than to Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by means of natural selection, to which Erasmus Darwin's ideas are more often compared. The Descent of Man is Darwin's second book, a follow-up to On the Origin of Species and the selection and the preservation of the favored races in the struggle for life. So a very racist title. So, if all life on Earth evolved out of primordial soup and lighting, how did it create consciousness? Well, they don't have an answer for consciousness, do they? So, yep. So, guys, so understand, Darwin was pulling his ideas from his uncle's poetry, from his grandfather's poetry. These ideas had been part of his family's legacy for at least 2 generations. However, these ideas were taken straight out of pagan mythology, literally lifted straight out of pagan mythology. So, sound familiar? Gnostic materialism. So I'll end shortly, all right? Philosophical speculation about the origin and development of the world goes back at least to Greek Anaximander from 611 to 547 BC, and his follower Anaximenes, 588 to 542 BC, who thought that the earth was muddy and that out of this primordial slime came plants, animals, and then human beings. Wait, hold, what? Scientists say, well, the earth was a primordial mud ball, because I've heard that language before. I've heard them explicitly say it was muddy, and it was a soup, and it got hit by lightning, and then voila, right? And suddenly you've got, Teslas, right? You've got Ford cars, right? There you go. You got chickens running around just because of lightning and mud. So understand, why is science literally taking ideas from pagan Greeks and then saying, oh, well, yeah, that's true, because it is not science, it is theology. They are resurrecting and promoting paganism because they reject Christianity. Understand, Christianity is rational, it is reasonable, it is based on reason. So the primordial soup to Teslas, yeah, but understand, maybe I'm not expressing it as well as I would like, because that is probably true, right? I don't have someone else with me to go through this, but do you see how this is literally what science has been saying, but they forgot to tell you that they stole this from pagan Greeks? We don't take ideas from pagan Greeks and say that's science automatically. So, yeah, he didn't even credit his grandpappy, that's true. Atheism is like Islam. Prophet Darwin simply synchronized other ideas, yeah. So, at first partly aquatic, humans subsequently moved on to land. Notably, Anaximander's wholly naturalistic explanation of things removed mythological explanations involving the Greek gods. So, you see, the idea of trying to use evolution and replacing creation by God is something, Janice Agabe, welcome, is something that's been going on for more than 2,500 years. The same story that scientists are telling you today is what Greek pagans have been saying since way back in the day. So they're literally trying to push pagan ideas. Now, this is not to say that some form of evolution doesn't happen or can't happen. We do see microevolution occurring. That certainly occurs, and we can't claim that macroevolution on some degree doesn't occur. But the fact that your fridge can turn into a Tesla, or the fact that your microwave oven can turn into a television set, no, absolutely no. That is nonsense. So, for philosophers Empedocles, Democritus, Epicurus, and Lucretius, life is not a divine creation, but an emanation. That's the Gnostic word, because the monad, Albert, emanates, right? So, but an emanation of the natural flux of things, part of a common continuum with the sea and the sky. Empedocles addressed the problem of the world's complexity by speculating that the flux, very broad term, the flux, tossed up all sorts of different shapes and objects generated at random by the chance interaction of elements. De rerum natura, on the nature of things, by the philosopher-poet Lucretius, above all other works from Roman antiquity, exerted a particular influence on the post-1700 world. It influenced more than one generation of the Darwin family. So now you've got paganism that's been going around for ages, a Gnostic paganism, speaking of emanations from Albert, the monad, and random stuff bumping together, quite literally generating things. And you've got this poet, philosopher poet, and then of course the Darwins come along and go, yeah, that stuff's that's the bomb. Yeah, we need to make this into a science now. Sunny Sparkle says it literally makes no sense. But yeah, can you see now the origin of Darwin's ideas are literally from Greek paganism? It's not science. The idea, he didn't invent it. He didn't discover it. He was trying to camouflage this pagan idea as science. Yeah. Vegetal says, I bought my kid a skateboard. Hopefully by the time he's 18, it will evolve into a BMW. Well, let's hope so. Yeah, it might just, have him just bang it into the pavement and maybe into a few cars, and so that the interaction of the elements can create a BMW. Yeah. It might even start thinking on its own. Amazing, every stupid worldview goes back to some kind of Luciferian Gnostic-like idea. Stephen Young, yes. So Vlad the Impaler says, this is amazing stuff. I'm going to put all of this information in a Word document. You're welcome. So the Earth is standing still, problem fixed, 28. Okay, I have no idea what that means, Dominique. I did biology at university in Australia. The whole degree was taught that all life evolved out of a primordial soup. No descent was allowed, of course. Of course, yeah, they deny the supernatural in Christianity, yet make new supernatural beliefs in their primordial soup and the plasma soup of the Big Bang. Yeah, so yeah, they're just replacing one idea with another. I mean, clearly. It's not neutral. I hate when lightning strikes in my mud in my yard and makes dinosaurs. Yeah. Says, yeah, guys, yeah. I mean, so don't have any mud around you because, yeah, the next day you might just have dinosaur chickens or something after a storm. You never know. If you lose your arm, just wear a plaster and it'll evolve into a bionic arm. Yeah, so guys, I mean, can you see how stupid this is, where this actually comes from? They forgot to tell you this is all pagan nonsense. I'm going to end shortly. So, yeah, what have you guys learned from this so far? I mean, does this all make sense? Carl Pagan. Let's end with Carl Pagan. The birth of Carl Paganism. Yeah, all of us grew up with Carl Pagan and his book Cosmos, right? So the inspiration for Lucretius' poem was a philosophical work called The Art of Happiness by Epicurus. So now we're going back a little bit before Lucretius, right, before his poem. And now we're going to Epicurus from 342 to 270 BC. The universe is mindless, without a creator, purposeless and non-intelligent, colliding atoms with no cosmic sources of direction. There is no end or purpose to existence. Life is ceaseless mutation, creation, and destruction, governed entirely by chance. Plants and animals evolved via trial and error from random processes over a long time. All species emerged, animal and human. That's the story. In some cases, that random process was unsuccessful, resulting in creatures not equipped to compete or to create offspring, and they succumbed to extinction in contradistinction to perfectly formed creatures able to adapt and reproduce. Nothing is a divine gift. The earth was not made for us. All human characteristics are imitations of lower animals. Humans are part of a material process which links them to inorganic matter, the animal world, and the stars in the sky. Now my question is, does that sound exactly like Carl Pagan? Do you guys remember Cosmos? Cosmos. Do you guys remember that from the 80s, the late 70s, 80s? You must have watched it. You must have seen Carl Pagan talking about that stuff. Doesn't this sound word for word like Carl Pagan? Please tell me I'm right. Please tell me I'm wrong. Whichever one. But man, this sounds like what Carl Pagan used to say in Cosmos. Cosmos by Carl Pagan. Andrew Martin. And XYZ says yes. So boom boom and long time makes me smarty pants. Steven. Yeah. Love you long time, $50. It sounds like Dawkins, but do you understand? They're not being original. They are simply repeating literal paganism, literal pagan poetry, mythology about the creation of the world. And we keep losing species, and that's why we get so many. Yeah. So yeah, this is called paganism. So I'm saying called pagan is just repeating Epicurus. So they are plagiarists. Yeah, they're not original thinkers. So what do you guys think of this? I mean, doesn't this make you like, huh? I thought they were discussing science, that I thought they used the scientific method and came up with these theories. Bullshit. Not true. They read this pagan stuff. They didn't like Christianity. They found this pagan crap and said, okay, we're going to call that science today. So that's what they did. Manny, XJW, thank you. Sloths are the pinnacle of evolution, no doubt about it. So, like Kami says, exactly my point. Kami bendecida y victoriosa. Yeah. My suspicion is that Elon is handled by pyramid to masons. I listened to his latest post. He's Tesla driving him around, and so I'm not buying the tech or space travel. He gives talks in lodges. Look, who knows? I'm not here to discuss that. That's above my pay grade, I think. The Earth is a billion, bajillions, marillion years old, and though through all that time us atheists have still not evolved any original and intelligent thought. No. So, Natalie Hart said, this is mind blowing. Why would that be? So, makes you think, pure PhD. Yes, horse, makes me think, pure PhD, piled high and deep. Um, yeah, so so I'll finish here, sure, I'll finish here, okay? So let me see how long this is. So guys, I think maybe I should finish here and then we'll talk about Epicurean paganism later. So yeah, that's it from me tonight. This is Darwinism. It has a literal parallel in paganism, Greek paganism. These ideas are not new. They are old ideas going back 2,500 years, possibly even more. Yes, PhD, piled high and deep. Scientists didn't tell you, hey, we've got these pagan ideas that are literally what pagans were saying, atheist pagans that atheists adore because they use those ideas and they use those pagans to attack Christianity. And yeah, we're going to say that that's how the earth started. So it's not that they just are, they're partisans. They simply are tribalists. They belong to this tribe and they're pushing this tribe's myth. Understand? That's all they're doing. So I can't wait until an article comes out saying that Lloyd claimed his fridge can become a Tesla. Yeah, well, yeah, I know. So anyway, that's the story for me. Is that really Satanism? I can become satanic, I guess. But so yeah, I think Elon is so blah blah. Let me see. Okay, guys. So look, that's it from me for tonight. I hope you learned something very useful. We've gone for like an hour and 20 minutes. Hopefully this has been helpful. I might do another show this week. I know I'll be on with Sam later this week, most likely, and I may be on with Kennedy Hall in a few days on the same topic. So just put your arm up and evolve into a wooden shield, yeah. Look, lately atheists have been making stupid comments. I have said to them, look, let's sit down. That they claim like atheism and socialism have no connections, that I'm simply making that up. And I've offered them to say, look, you're making these claims. Let's sit down and talk. Let's do a live stream. We'll talk about it. We'll present evidence. I'm still waiting for takers on that. That hasn't happened yet. I mean, if someone wants to come on my channel and tell me I'm wrong, and then wants to make all sorts of claims, then fine. Let's meet. Let's talk about that. But they have not been willing to do so. So thank you, guys. So understand these ideas are not rational. We know for a fact these pagans are not rational. This is primitive thinking. Would you refute someone on the Talmud? On Kennedy Hall's channel, I did 2 shows, and in both cases, lots of people there are a lot of very anti-Jewish, very anti-Semitic Catholics. Let's be clear about that. There's a lot of very anti-Semitic Protestants too. And all of these people who are making claims about the Talmud, I invited them to meet with me and to let's have a talk about it. You bring your evidence. Because I was talking about Islam and Sharia law, and all of them ignored the Muslims, gave them a complete 100% pass, and they started attacking the Jews. And I was like, okay, so you're okay with these things in Islam, the exact same things, even worse, because I've got a lot more evidence for it, but you want to attack the Talmud and the Jews. And in fact, on Thursday, someone mentioned the Jews in the Talmud. It says you can lie, and they quoted me the very common Bava Kama 13 or whatever quote, which is just literally a few words. And that's actually from a section with like 20 paragraphs. And if you read the paragraphs, actually, you know what? Let's just go there. Let me actually do this. While I'm here, so since this has come up, would I just... so let me just find that. Just looking for the reference. Give me a sec. Okay, here we go. Owen. Oh, bugger, I hate when I do this to myself. I'm on the wrong page now. Give me a sec. Okay, so let me just find it manually. Sorry. Yeah, this is slightly off topic. Well, we're going to go into the Talmud for a minute. Okay, so let me see. Being anti-Semitic as a Christian is one of the greatest sins. Yeah, I think it's wrong. I think it's very wrong. Thank you, questions and answers. That's a very kind comment. He says, this is the best channel I've found for the last couple of years. Thank you. Have you publicly debated atheists? No, I mean, I stick to my channel. I've invited Muslims, hundreds of Muslims, who've made comments to meet with me publicly and have a discussion. Let's bring the evidence. Let's have a discussion about it. And not one is accepted yet. So I don't see. Yeah, I don't know what the point is. I mean, it's like I just present evidence. And okay, so let's talk about this. And I'm going to have to enable audio. I'm going to play this for a minute. Okay, this is Owen Benjamin.
You think that they have to tell the truth? You have to understand that in the Talmud, the Jews say, let me quote it, Jews may use lies to circumvent a Gentile. That's in Baba Kama, 113a. So when people say, yeah, but the Jews said that they're not excited about the killing Christ, there's literally...
Okay, so we'll talk about the killing Christ another time, but this was his discussion on the Jews. The Talmud says you can lie to deceive a Gentile. Now, in Islam, in the Sharia, I've got very detailed talks on this on my channel. I've got shorter and longer videos, like 4 minutes, 7 minutes, half an hour, 2 hours. I've got very long videos and short videos. The Sharia has chapters, whole detailed chapters detailing and speaking about how to lie. But the Talmud has it's haphazard stuff. So let's see. I'm going to tell you bluntly, spoiler, Owen Benjamin is lying. Owen Benjamin is wrong. Owen Benjamin's an idiot. So he says here, if you think that they have to tell the truth, you have to understand that the Talmud, in the Talmud they say, let me quote it, Jews may use lies to circumvent a Gentile. That's in Bava Kama 113a by Owen Benjamin. Okay? Now, I'm going to read the necessary passage and we're going to have a look and see how true this is. The Gemara answers, Rabbi Hanina bar Kahana said that Shmuel says the Mishnah is discussing a customs collector who does not have a limitation placed by the governor on the amount he may collect, and he collects as he pleases. Alternatively, the sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai said, the Mishnah is discussing a customs collector, a tax collector, who stands on his own. He was not appointed by the government, but on his own, and he forces people to give him money. In the one case, you've got a tax collector appointed who is overtaxing people, stealing from them. On the other hand, you've got someone who is simply stealing money from people. Now, every single person that I've ever seen who talks about this, the Talmud says you can lie, never references this. They don't open with this, okay? The Gemara notes, and there are those who teach the statements of Rabbi Hanina, one may vow before murderers, plunderers, and customs collectors in order to reinforce the claim that a certain item that is being commandeered is teruma, or that it belongs to the king's house, and therefore avoid its seizure, despite the fact that it is not teruma, or that it does not belong to the king's house. Teruma, I think, is like it's not something that can be taxed. It's like an heirloom or something like that, whatever that is. So they're not quoting the Talmud at all. They're simply paraphrasing, right? One may vow before murderers, plunderers, and customs collectors. So I would say something before a murderer or a plunderer if it would help me, right? That's logical. That's what Muslims would call taqiyya anyway. That's how they try to morally justify taqiyya, but Islamic lying goes way beyond that. Right? And so this is what they are talking about. This is the actual sentence, or the few words taken out of this entire section. Now let's go look at the rest of the section. Can it be that it is permitted to pronounce such a vow before customs collectors? Because the Talmud works on what they call pilpul. This is a principle of what they call peppering. So it is basically responsa. I will make a statement. I'll make a random statement. And then the students have to respond. And then we're testing their knowledge of the law, and we're testing how well the law covers all contingencies, right? Can it be that it is permitted to pronounce such a vow before customs collectors? But doesn't Shmuel say the law of the kingdom is the law? It should therefore be prohibited to state such a vow. In other words, it should be prohibited to lie to the customs collector. Rabbi Hanina bar Kahana said that the Shmuel says the Mishnah issues its ruling with regards to customs collectors who does not have a limitation placed on the amount he may collect. Alternatively, the sages of the school of Rabbi Yanai say the Mishnah issues its ruling with regard to a customs collector who stands on its own. So the context here is specifically a customs collector who is stealing your money. They're not talking about lying to everybody. So first of all of these people who hate Jews, and we know they hate Jews, and if you're watching in the audience, we know you hate Jews. And you're lying. You're wrong. Because you cannot bring me the other. I can bring in Islam a complete set of chapters that discusses lying, how to lie, whom to lie to, when to lie. That does not exist in the Talmud. I've not seen it, but if you can show it to me, by all means, please do. All they do is they twist and they misrepresent this. In answer to the question, with regard to a customs collector who does not have a limitation placed on the amount of money he may collect, alternatively, the dispute is with regards to a customs collector who is self-appointed. So this context is repeated over and over. Rav Ashi said, with regards to a Gentile customs collector, now the Gentile part comes in, whom one may deceive, as it is taught in a Baraita, in the case of a Jew and a Gentile who approach the court for judgment in a legal dispute, if you can vindicate the Jew under Jewish law, vindicate him, and say to the Gentile, this is our law. If he can be vindicated under Gentile law, vindicate him and say to the Gentile, this is your law. And if it is not possible to vindicate him under either system of law, one approaches the case circuitously, seeking a justification to vindicate the Jew. This is the statement of Rabbi Yishmael, but Rabbi Akiva is far more senior. He's the big guy here. He disagrees, and he says one does not approach the case circuitously in order to vindicate the Jew due to the sanctification of God's name, as God's name will be desecrated if the Jewish judge employs dishonest means. There's your answer. Thou shalt not lie. So you will not lie because this will desecrate God's holy name if the Jewish judge employs dishonest means. Now, I'm willing to bet that not once has that stupid pencil neck E. Muhammad Jones or any of these people who make these claims ever quoted the rest of this passage. Right? No one, I'll bet, has ever quoted this in detail that actually said, let's continue though, there's actually more to it. So, Babylonian Talmud, Tractate Bava Kama, Volume 1, we should not attempt to circumvent him on account of the sanctification of God's name. Right? And they say, whence can we learn that the robbery of a heathen is forbidden? Right? So they tell us here the robbery of a heathen is forbidden. It goes on to say, right? So it goes on to say there's some other stuff, and then they talk about, oh, you can steal from them. But then they say that, no, that's a whole other story. But you guys get the point? Was that helpful? Did you learn something from that? Yeah. So let me see if I missed any comments. Christians should know better. We have plenty of writings can be taken out of context too. Yes. Yeah. So yeah. So anyway, guys, hopefully that was useful to you. You learned something. Look, I don't think he's lying. I think he was just spewing stuff he heard around. Look, if he was lied to and he's repeating that lie, is he telling the truth? No, he's repeating a lie. He might be lying unknowingly. He is still lying. Is that lie still destructive? Yes, it is. Is that lie still destructive as if he knew he was lying? He might be misinformed. It's still a lie. He's repeating a lie. He's spreading a lie. He is making a lie common. He's using that lie to justify whatever toxic behavior will result from it. And we know what kind of toxic behavior results from that. So, yeah. So understand this is just a lie. And the final statement, so this is a question and answer. It's like, what if, what if, what if? The whole Talmud is what if this, what if this? You'll see constantly the language of, yeah, but this guy disagrees and he says this, and then that guy disagrees and says this, and that guy disagrees. It's a discussion. It's not even law. In many cases, there's no law. In many cases, there's not even a resolution. It just cuts off halfway. It just stops randomly. They're talking about, I don't know, threshing grain and delivering grain to the warehouse, and then suddenly they're talking about horses and how horses have babies. And you're like, how do we get from here to there? So, yeah, this is amazingly, highly misquoted section. I've got some stuff, I've got some videos on the topic, on the lies about the Talmud. So you can believe me, just 99.9% of what you've been told about the Talmud is lies. It's flat out a bunch of lies. Hopefully that answered the Talmud question forever asked. So guys, I need to call it a night. And yeah, hopefully this was helpful. Okay. So guys, thank you. Use this information, make atheists' lives miserable. Darwin was obviously a nasty man, and this is all just Greek paganism wrapped up in supposed science. Yeah. Calls Gentiles animals. Yeah, look, I can do more of this Talmud stuff another time. Believe me, it's all bogus. Okay?